Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 34 of this podcast. Today's date is March the 4th. In today's podcast, we're getting into four topics. Obviously, number one, LeBron James breaking 40K over the weekend. We get into LeBron, maybe a little bit of the GOAT conversation, but how does his stats line up with the other greats? Secondly, speaking of greats, how about the great Caitlin Clark breaking Pistol Pete Maravich's record for Division I most points scored, male or female? We'll talk about Caitlin Clark's impact on women's basketball and the fact that she decided to not use her COVID year and enter the 2024 WNBA Draft. Third, we stay in the college game with Villanova after an impressive win at Providence, a Villanova team that was top 20 in the country preseason. Kyle Neptune's team, and I've been critical, starting to find their legs a little bit. Can Villanova make the tournament, and can they actually make a run? And lastly, I give you my all-time team for the number one team in the country right now, and that's the Houston Cougars. So let's get started with today's podcast with the king, LeBron James. Over the weekend, LeBron became the first player in NBA history to score 40,000 points in his game versus the Nuggets. And it's an amazing feat for a guy at the age of 39 that is really playing the level of basketball that LeBron James continues to play at. And it's amazing to watch because when you think about some of the greats, Jordan, Kareem, so on and so forth, they weren't putting up these stats that LeBron's putting up this year. 25.3, 15th in the NBA in points per game, 7 rebounds, 38th. 7.9 assists, 8th, and 28th in field goal shooting percentage at 52.7%. And this is just a microcosm to the greatness of LeBron. You know, when I was on with Scotty Farrell over the weekend on the Betting Above the Rim show, remember, folks, the Betting Above the Rim show every Saturday and Sunday, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Scotty and myself, we kind of got into this GOAT conversation because I've always had LeBron as a number 2. And folks, it's getting to a point where I can't put LeBron number 1 by himself. But I'm changing my tune. I'm now going to have, co-GOATs, 1A and 1B of Michael Jordan and LeBron James, because I can't discount what LeBron has done over the course of his career. Now, you can sit there and say, oh, he didn't go 6-0 in the finals. I get it. He's got way more finals appearances than Jordan does. Oh, he hasn't scored as much as Mike. Well, he averages more rebounds and more assists per game than Jordan, right? Oh, well, Jordan was a better scorer. Well, LeBron's got better field goal shooting percentage and better from 3, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. And I think because they're so close to me now, I am now willing to say 1A and 1B, LeBron, James, and Michael Jordan. Now, when we think about LeBron now, let's really quickly talk about the Lakers. A Lakers team that going into tonight, March the 4th, is sitting in the play-in game, folks. They are right now in 10th place with 29 losses. See, for me, folks, when I do standings, I go by the loss column, right? So they're going to make the play-in tournament. They're 5 games ahead of Utah. Utah and the Rockets aren't making a run. So the question is, a Lakers team that is 4 games behind New Orleans and Sacramento, can they get up to 6? I don't think so, folks. And this is where the greatest LeBron James people could knock, and I'm going to say this. This has nothing to do with LeBron. LeBron's done his part. LeBron has carried this team, right? To me, it's about the other people. It's about the Anthony Davises who gave you 17-11 over the weekend against Denver. It's not good enough. And he's got to get you 25 and 15. You know, it's an inconsistent play of D'Angelo Russell, even though he's giving you 17.7. It's Rui Hachimura. What are we going to get out of him at 12.3? Torian Pritchard was great earlier in the year, slid back. Cam Reddish, come on. Guys, run out of chances. Christian Wood, can get you 20 a game. He's giving you 6.9. Gabe Vincent, 5 games this year. Jared Vanderbilt, 29 games. So while we need to appreciate the greatness of LeBron James at age 39, with the season that he is having, leading the team in points, second in rebounds, first in assists, first in steals, right? At the end of the day, folks, at the end of the day, he can't carry this team to a title. And it'll be interesting to see what transpires next for the Lakers after this season if they were to not make the playoffs. Let's move on to Caitlin Clark, who has really, I'm going to say this, in our generation, I don't know if there's a more important women's athlete in this country. Now, you could argue Serena Williams. I will give you that. You could argue Simone Biles. You can argue that. But the way that Caitlin Clark has completely transformed women's basketball into a must-see nightly event. I want people to think about this. Caitlin Clark broke the record yesterday, Sunday. Most points in college basketball Division I history, passing the great Pistol Pete Maravich. And I want people to understand something about Caitlin Clark in that game yesterday. What happens if I told you that that game yesterday had the highest resale value of any game in the history of women's basketball? That's college and that's pro. Caitlin Clark did that. A Caitlin Clark who decided to stay home and play at the University of Iowa, native of Des Moines. A Caitlin Clark who continues to do things that are dare I say, Herculean. Like, think about this, folks. Caitlin Clark, every year of her career, has averaged at least 26.6 points per game. A Caitlin Clark, every year of her career, who has averaged at least 45.2% from the floor. A Caitlin Clark, every year who's averaged at least 33% from the free throw line. A Caitlin Clark, every year who's shot 84% from the, 33% from the three-point line, 84% from the foul line. A Caitlin Clark, who her assists per game have averaged at least 7 every year. A Caitlin Clark, who's averaged as a guard at least 6 rebounds a game every season of her career. What she has done is, like I said, she made basketball on the women's side must see. And it's interesting. I was listening to a friend of mine, Kenny Brooks. If you guys don't know Kenny Brooks is the head coach at Virginia Tech. And he talked about the naysayers of social media, them knocking women's college basketball. Let me explain something to you folks. And Kenny Brooks was right on. And I texted Kenny this earlier today. Women's basketball, as a coach, as a basketball purist, is so much better to watch than the men. You don't believe me? Sit down, watch it for yourself. Think about the fact that the athleticism is different. So now you have to depend on your fundamental and your skill and not your athleticism. Think about the fact that with the men, you have to think about throwing lobs and playing it to the rim. You don't do that with the women. Everything's below the rim. It makes the skill development of women's basketball players, they have it harder than the men. They do, because the men can rely on athletic ability. The women are more reliant on basketball in its purest form. So if you want to watch basketball in its purest form, I'm sorry, folks, and you can think all you want. I'd rather watch women's basketball than the men. I'd rather watch the WNBA than the NBA because of the way that they have to be fundamentally sound, all these women basketball players. And speaking of the WNBA, how about Caitlin Clark announcing that she is going to forego her last season of eligibility and declare for the 2024 WNBA Draft? Think about this, folks. Caitlin Clark has the ability this year, with her freshman year being the COVID year of 2021. Remember, folks, 2021 season, there was no NCAA tournament on the men or women's side. So they basically allowed all those players that were freshmen or higher, right, that didn't get a chance to play in a tournament, an extra year of eligibility. So Caitlin Clark, although she broke the record, actually has another year that she can go play at Iowa. And she decided to go to the WNBA. And let me tell you something. They are so thankful in the WNBA because a league that really kind of jumped off last year with the ratings skyrocketed, particularly for the play of Caitlin Clark, of Angel Reese, and the women's college tournament. Their ratings took off, along with the fact of the New York Liberty and the Las Vegas Aces being the two super teams. Now it's going to happen again. I expect the women's basketball ratings for the NCAA tournament to be higher this year than last year. And with Caitlin Clark going to the WNBA, I expect their ratings to keep going up as well. And I'll tell you what, the Indiana Fever, a team that struggled mightily the last couple of years, now get Aaliyah Boston out of South Carolina last year, and then Caitlin Clark this year. Wow, what a combo at the point guard and the center position. It's going to be absolutely outstanding to watch Caitlin Clark excel in the WNBA. Let's move on. Let's stay in the college game with the Villanova Wildcats. A Villanova Wildcats team and program that, let's be honest, folks, I have been critical of at times. Maybe it goes back to my kind of knowing a little bit about the program, my fandom, if you will, my allegiance to how great of a coach Jay Wright is, the fact that I've gotten to know people like Randy Foy over the years. The standard was the standard at Villanova, and the standard had not been met last year or this year. But things have changed with the Villanova Wildcats. A Villanova Wildcats team that has won 5 out of their last 6 games. And it started after that 56-53 loss at Xavier, when they went and they absolutely pounded Seton Hall 80-54. You think that was a fluke? Then they beat Georgetown by 16, right? Here's some notable games, right? They beat Butler by 10. They had that loss to UConn. Folks, there's no shame in that UConn game. The UConn's the best team in the country. But after losing that, they beat Georgetown again 75-47, and then win at the Dunk, which is a hard place to play, 71-60 in a game going away. So a team now that is, according to a lot of people with bracketology, they're on the bubble, squarely on the bubble. Some people have them as last 4 buys. Some people have them as the last 4 in. Some people have them as first 4 out. Why is Villanova playing better? For one, you got to start with the big man, the big lefty, Eric Dixon, who has continued over the course of his career to get better and better and better. Points per game, highest of his career, 16.1 points per game. Rebounds right even at 6.2. A big man that shoots 47% from the floor and 35% from 3. The big man who could step out and really do some things. What about the transfer? TJ Bamba, the native of the Bronx from Washington State, who has really gotten going. Now, he only gets you 10.4 points per game. But TJ Bamba is one of the best three-point shooters in the Big East, shooting at, ready, folks? He is shooting at 36.7% from 3, but he has been playing really well as of late shooting the ball. But to me, when you look at Nova and why they are making this run, it's this kid. It's Justin Moore. A Justin Moore that 2 years ago had this team on the cusp of getting to the Final Four, and he ruptures his Achilles tendon in the Elite 8 game versus Houston. I will say this, folks. If Justin Moore doesn't tear his Achilles tendon, I think they win the national championship that year. A Justin Moore who now, although only getting you 10.2 points per game, double figures of 4 out of his last 5, really good 15 points, 4 out of 6 from 3 in their win at Providence. If you get this out of Justin Moore, if you get the left-hander and Eric Dixon patrolling the middle and stepping up from 3, If you get TJ Bamba to play the way he's been playing as of late, if Mark Armstrong continues to develop, Tyler Burton as that stretch four, Hakeem Hart, this team, folks, if they get into the tournament, remember, folks, I just want you to remember this really quick about Villanova before I move on to Houston. I want people to remember this, folks. This team did beat North Carolina. This team did beat Memphis by 20. This team did go on the road and beat Creighton. This team is no slouch. And Kyle Neptune's got them peaking at the right time. And if they can go 2-0 the rest of the way, they go to Seton Hall on Wednesday, they end the season at home Saturday versus Creighton. If they can get these two, Villanova will be in the NCAA tournament, and they'll be flat out dangerous. Let's end today's podcast by me, the coach, giving you my all-time team for the number one team in the country, the Houston Cougars. A Houston Cougars team that is very rich in basketball tradition, folks, if you really think about it. People think about Houston and they think about the Kelvin Sampson now. But you got to think about the Guy Lewis teams of the early 80s, right? The Phi Sigma Gamma teams. And even going back to the 60s, a program with a rich tradition. Here is my bench all time for the Houston Cougars. Let off with the point guard, Rob Williams. Don Chaney. You may know about him. Let's go to the NBA. Bo Outlaw. Michael Young. And Mr. Mean. Larry Mitchell. And when you start with a guy like Rob Williams, who was a point guard catalyst, Rob was for those Houston Cougar teams, the early teams, right? Not you think about Fly Samuel Jim, you think about like 83, 84, but Rob Williams, who was the number 19 overall pick in 1982, one-time NCAA All-Region, Southwest Conference. Remember that conference, folks? Player of the Year in 80-81. 3 seasons with the Houston Cougars, scoring at about 21 points per game, 4.6 assists, 1.8 steals. He was the point guard of I would say, the early Phi Sigma Gamma teams. Let's move on to our next member of our bench from the Houston Cougars, and that's Don Chaney. Now, folks, Don Chaney, decorated college career, 2-time NCAA All-Region, 3 seasons with Houston, number 12 pick of the 68 NBA Draft, was part of that Houston team that we'll talk about a little bit with Alvin Hayes, who's on my first team. Don Chaney also went on to coach in the NBA and had a really good career in the NBA, including some time with the Boston Celtics. Let's move on to Bo Outlaw. 2 seasons at Houston, 16 seasons in the NBA, an undrafted player. Bo Outlaw was a junkyard dog, 14 points per game, 9.1 rebounds. Really had a decorated career, a long NBA career. Not one that included a lot of accolades, but really someone that was really, like I said, a junkyard dog, a defender, kind of a jack of all trades kind of player, interior player, rough, rugged. Next up, Michael Young was part of that Phi Sigma Gamma team, 24th pick in the 84 draft, 4 seasons at Houston, 1 one-time NCAA All-Tournament team, 2-time All-Region. A Michael Young team that was part of the great Houston Cougar teams that, remember, folks, I want people to remember this. They could have won multiple national championships, right? They lose to Patrick Ewing in 84, right? They lose in obviously, we know about the NC State Wolfpack, the amazing run in 83 with the late Jim Valvano. That Houston Cougar team was fantastic. Last member of my bench, Mr. Mean. Larry Mitchell, who was a phenomenal athlete, rugged, tough, 2-time All-Region, 4 seasons at Houston, 29th pick of the 83 draft. So that is my bench for the Houston Cougars. Now, let's get to my starting lineup for Houston. Marcus Sasser, Otis Birdsong, Clyde the Glide Drexler, Alvin Hayes, and it says Hakeem Olajuwon, but at Houston it was Akeem Olajuwon. And let's get started with Marcus Sasser, who just left and now is the Detroit Pistons. Marcus Sasser, one-time NCAA All-Region. American Conference Player of the Year in 2023. Two-time All-American. One-time consensus All-American. 4 seasons at Houston. And really the point guard and the leader of the teams that Kelvin Sampson has helped rebuild this program at Houston. Marcus Sasser, unbelievable career. You could argue, couldn't he be first team over a guy like Don Chaney for what he's done over his course? But I went ahead and I put Marcus first team. Obviously, you could argue Don Chaney, some of those guys. Second team, Rob Williams as first team. But I went, obviously, with Sasser. Let's move on to Otis Birdsong. Player you may not know about. Had a really good career partially with the Indiana Pacers. Otis Birdsong, 76-77 Southwest Conference Player of the Year. All-American. 4 seasons at Houston, and the number 2 overall draft pick, scored at about 24.4 points per game, 4.9 rebounds per game, shot at about 55%. Otis Birdsong, a really underrated player, underrated NBA player, solid NBA player, and a really great player for Houston in the late 70s. Let's move on to Clyde, the Glide, Drexler, 82-83 Southwest Conference Player of the Year, one-time consensus All-American, and the number 14 pick of the 83 draft to the Portland Trailblazers. Clyde Drexler, that ended up winning an NBA championship with the Houston Rockets when he came back in 1995 in a trade. Clyde Drexler, one of the high-flying, most athletic players I've ever seen. One of my favorites growing up. Also a member of the original Dream Team in 1992. And a quick story, folks. Do you know that Clyde Drexler was drafted, obviously, in 83? The number 2 pick in 84 belonged to Portland. And one of the reasons why Portland did not take Michael Jordan is they took Sam Bowie because they already had Clyde Drexler. Could you imagine Clyde the Glide with Michael Jordan in Portland? Oh, that would have been fabulous to watch. But we got to see him on the Dream Team in 1992. Let's move on to the power forward. Easy-E, Elvin Hayes. One-time NCAA All-Tournament team, 3-time All-Region, Player of the Year in 67-68, 2-time All-American, 3 seasons at Houston. Why only 3 seasons, folks? Back then, freshmen did not get to play. There was a freshman team, and then there was the varsity or the college team. Number 1 pick of the 68 NBA Draft. And folks, there's a story, I don't know if you ever heard it. They played Lou Alcindor, you know him as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I believe 1968 in the Astrodome. In the Astrodome, one of the first time they played a basketball game in like a football, or at that point, obviously the Astrodome was where the Astros played. It was a baseball stadium. And what a performance as Elvin Hayes outplayed Lou Alcindor in that game. I do believe Lou Alcindor got him back, and UCLA won a national championship. But what a phenomenal Hall of Fame career by Eazy-E, Elvin Hayes. Last, at center, Akeem, the Dream, Olajuwon. Boy, he had more moves than Baskin-Robbins had flavors. 2-time NCAA All-Region. 1983 NCAA Tournament, most outstanding player. And his team lost. 1-time All-American. 2-time NCAA All-Region. 83-84 Southwest Conference Player of the Year. Number 1 overall pick of the 84 draft to the Houston Rockets. 3 seasons as a Houston Cougar. And Akeem Olajuwon, who was fantastic. It was really amazing to watch college basketball, particularly in that 84 national championship game when Akeem Olajuwon went one-on-one with Patrick Ewing back in the day when bigs ruled college basketball. And Akeem Olajuwon, now known as Hakeem, one of the great careers of the NBA, probably one of the 25 best players of all time. Really quick to show everyone my bench again. Rob Williams, Don Chaney, Bo Outlaw, Michael Young, and Mr. Mean. Starting lineup for Houston. Marcus Sasser, Otis Birdsong, Clyde Drexler, Elvin Hayes, Akeem Olajuwon. I wonder if Jamal Shead would have been on that list. Maybe we'll have to do it again and revisit after Jamal Shead's career ends at Houston. For all things sports gambling, just go and download that Sports Grid app. Available on Google Play and Apple Store. It is your one-stop shop for everything pregame, postgame, props, predictions, and more from the best in the business and the exclusive home of Coach Young's College Scouting Report. Next podcast, episode 35, will be Wednesday. So I figured if we did the number 1 team in Houston all-time team, then maybe we should go to number 2 next time. That will be the UConn Huskies. For my producer, Matt George, who does a great job, and Vinny with the graphics, this is Coach Young. We'll see you next time. Remember, folks, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.